Hello, I'm George. I am an advanced Cicerone and national ranked BJCP judge. In these beer videos, we either go through a quick tasting of a certain beer or we do a deep dive on a style, whether it's just doing a full BJCP score sheet on a beer. In this video, I don't want to go too deep on each beer because what we're going to do is taste 3 beers that are on the commercial example list for a category. That way, just by tasting them side by side and looking for the differences in the malt character, the hop character, yeast character, the balance, the intensity, all of those sort of things, we can get a good picture of what that style means. So the style we're doing today is 26C, which is Belgian Tripel, and this is from the 2021 guidelines that I'm looking at. And we have Westmalle Tripel, which gets credit for basically inventing the style in the 1930s. And then we have Chimay Tripel and St. Bernardus Tripel. So these two are Trappist brands. That means they have the Trappist mark. That's a protected term and label. And St. Bernardus used to brew for one of the other famous Trappist brands, St. Sixtus / Westmalle, and they're nearby. They're just down the road, basically. From Westmalle / St. Sixtus. But they definitely get credit for making these Trappist style beers really, really well. So alcohol wise, we have 9.5% on the Westmalle and 8% on the Chimay Tripel and 8% on the St. Bernardus. So I'm going to pour each beer and then kind of go through and do like a general taste on each one. And then I'll go through and look for kind of the differences that stand out right away, and then we'll try to focus on like the yeast character, hop character, malt character, and get a general sense. So let's go for it. By the way, using the fancy sherry glassware today because when we moved, we only brought a few pieces of glassware. So here we go. So that is the Westmalle. So offhand, the color, very light. This should be kind of like a light gold or straw up to maybe like a light amber in color range. And it should pour a really like frothy, thick, consistent, rocky style of head. And so far that's true. I see a little bit more color on the Chimay Tripel. And for the St. Bernardus, see a little lighter color. It's kind of in between where the Westmalle is and the Chimay is. So we're going to go through and we're going to do kind of a aroma run through. And so if you have these beers at home, the idea with the BJCP classic examples list is that they're usually beers that represent this style really well. They show a range within the style, because you couldn't just taste one of these and say every Tripel must taste like this. So that's the point of doing these side by sides. It really helps you wrap your head around the style, even if that's just for fun and just to kind of learn the style and what your favorite one is, or if it's for preparation for an exam so that you can actually speak with the degree of confidence about the range within that style and how certain things can be a little different. And therefore also, what's the thing that's always there in that style? But I digress. So with the Westmalle, the initial impression on the aroma is a good amount of stone fruit, and I would say like a really ripe peach or pear, overripe banana, and then a medium pepper, clove. It's fairly assertive on the phenol yeast character, and the overall yeast character I would say is medium plus. And then looking for the malt character, I smell some grainy like sweetness, like maybe fresh dinner roll or fresh bread. It's been coming out of the oven kind of. And for hops, a low kind of herbal spiciness. So then let's go to the aroma on this one. So this is the Chimay Tripel. Wow, right off the bat, I notice a lot more of like a coriander, cardamom. So we'll say more fruity slash spicy yeast character, so more ester and phenol yeast character that could be influenced by some hops. The style does allow for some spices, but they should be well integrated. And let me read this real fast. They don't specify if there's any spices in there. I believe not, but the style can use candy sugar, and a lot of times those blonde candy sugars can provide quite a lot of floral and kind of spicy aromas. So right off the gate, like I mentioned, the yeast character is high versus medium plus, and I think that's mingling nicely with some medium hop aroma and some low alcohol spiciness. And the malt character is a little bit more kind of elevated. I'd say it's at medium low, and the malt I would describe as honey-like, but that could be part of the candy sugar too. And then for St. Bernardus, right out the gate, I'm getting more of like a white pepper with black pepper. Overall yeast is medium plus, and again, more kind of overripe banana. In terms of the flavor profile, I'm finding, or the aroma profile, I'm finding that the Westmalle and the St. Bernardus have a little bit more in common, and the amount of like coriander slash cardamom character coming off of the triple stands out. Some of those elements are shared between the three, but definitely a little bit more of this very nice like spicy character coming out of the spicy slash potpourri sort of character coming from the Chimay triple. Even thinking of like pink peppercorn on that, really nice. All right, so I'm going to go backwards now. So we'll do flavor on the St. Bernardus triple. Similar flavor profile. The banana is not like the dominant part of the yeast profile, but it's definitely one of the louder characters there. But it's being supported with a fairly assertive phenol character that I would describe as black pepper, a little bit of pink peppercorn, clove for sure. And the balance is definitely leaning towards the spice character. So like the star of the show here is the yeasty profile. It has a very dry finish, high carbonation as well. The bitterness is assertive on that. I'd say medium bitterness. And it's definitely enhancing this kind of drying sensation or sort of overall dryness of the beer. The alcohol is slightly warming, but it's pleasant. It's definitely not overwhelming, and it's definitely a sneaky beer. But I do feel like, if I'm describing this beer, it's reminding me a lot of a pale Weizenbock. It doesn't have as much of the yeast, the like banana character, but it definitely does have some overripe banana, and it has a slightly more complex, I would say, hop profile. And it does have a bit more bitterness than I would expect on a Weizenbock, and then of course the use of candy sugar would exclude it. But I'll get into some style comparisons a little later. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. So I noticed a little bit more body on the Chimay triple. All of those phenols and esters that I was describing before are still medium plus on the palate. Bitterness is a little bit more intense on the Chimay triple, yet there's a lingering sweetness there. So I think so far the Chimay triple, to me, has a higher perception of sweetness from the malt character, and that jives with even just the appearance being a little bit darker. And again, that could just be a slightly darker candy sugar that they use, kind of, who knows, but I'm going to describe it as malt slash sugar character because it's a mix of both of those things, providing the alcohol or the sugar for fermentation there. And a very long lingering bitterness. And this bitterness to me is coming from part the hop character, but also from the phenol character from the yeast, enhanced by the dryness and the high carbonation. But overall, there's slightly more sweetness. Where this is dry, I think I could say this one is just slightly off dry. Calling it dry would be definitely fair, but when I'm comparing the two, I do detect a little bit more of a lingering sweetness on there, in addition to this lingering bitterness, which is a very interesting trick that the brewer is using to make this feel in some ways more palatable, because it's sweetness, that sweetness is there, and it's making me want to drink more because I have this kind of cloying sort of thing lingering on, yet that bitterness is also still lingering. So a pretty cool little trick there, but I'll talk about overall later. So, and then let's move on to the Westmalle. Again, that really overripe banana and clove on the aroma. Slightly more carbonation on it. And the flavor is definitely, to me, like the two main things happening here are the bitterness is fairly high. I'll call it, honestly, I'd call this bitterness high. That perception is being enhanced by how dry it is. The carbonation was higher on that one than the other ones. And the flavor perception is more of this like overripe banana with this firm bitterness that I think is a mix of hop-derived bitterness and phenolic bitterness. And the finish is very dry. So that bitterness just like lingers on and on. The bitterness is lingering for about as much time as the Chimay, but the Chimay had a little bit more of that sweetness that was kind of mingling with it. And overall, I'd say the St. Bernardus is definitely less bitter. In terms of the style itself, let's read this, because now that I have all three of these, it's a good opportunity for me to read the overall impression and see how it describes all three of these beers at the same time, even though they are different. Each of these are distinctly different, yet there's something about them that makes them the same. So what is that? So the overall impression in BJCP is a strong, pale, somewhat spicy Belgian ale with a pleasant rounded malt flavor, firm bitterness, and dry finish. Quite aromatic with spicy, fruity, and light alcohol notes, combining with the supportive, clean malt character to produce a surprisingly drinkable beverage considering the high alcohol content. So that's the overall description or overall impression from BJCP. And when you're deep diving into a style, I think it's a good idea, perfectly suitable, to just focus on that or make that the thing that you really like hone in on, and use that to help you write the elevator pitch of like, what is a Belgian Tripel? So if a customer or during an exam, someone's going to ask you, okay, tell me what a Belgian Tripel is, you can use this overall impression alongside actually tasting the beers now that they're in front of you to really like solidify in your mind and keep it pretty simple. From there, you can read into the aroma and the appearance and everything else to give you like more vocabulary. But I think in terms of like dedicating your mind to memorizing something, it's for me really useful to keep it really simple. So I go back to this and I say it's a strong, pale, somewhat spicy Belgian ale with a pleasant rounded malt flavor, firm bitterness, and dry finish. And for me, like just knowing that and seeing that, yes, between all of these, they are pale. It is somewhat spicy. It does have a pleasant rounded malt finish. It is quite aromatic, and it is spicy, fruity, and there is like this light alcohol that's kind of playing a role in all of these things. And within any beer style, you should be able to kind of note how the hops, yeast, and alcohol, or lack thereof, sort of work with each other. So I should say hops, malt, and yeast, how they all kind of like work within each other. In this case, we have adjuncts too, the sugar, how they all kind of play a role and support each other, and that's really well display here. So I'm going to give it one more pass, and that'll kind of conclude this. But this is what I would highly recommend for sitting down if you're with a group of friends, is taking the time to go through these. I think if I was in a study group and we spent about 15 to 20 minutes going through one style and talking about it, that would be a pretty effective use of time. You could go on and on, of course, but you want to be careful about kind of like rambling on too long, which I feel like I'm at risk of doing here even. But let's run through it one more time, and I'm gonna give my little overall impression for each beer. Dry, more like spicy and bitter, with notes of overripe banana on the ester side, and black pepper on the phenol side, and firm bitterness with a little bit of alcohol heat. So that's Westmalle. So then my overall description to help a consumer or a friend understand Chimay Tripel would be, it's really dry, pretty assertive bitterness, but it has this really nice supportive yeast character that is fruity and peppery. And the fruity I would describe as coriander, orange peel, cardamom. So that's more spicy, but kind of fruity notes come from that pink peppercorn. And then on the spicy side, I'd say it's more like black pepper and with a hint of clove. And then on the end, lingering bitterness. So that Chimay Tripel is probably really cool with some more kind of like savory, fatty sort of dishes and stews because of that bitterness. That bitterness is an asset. It's both an asset and something that needs to be dealt with in terms of like overall enjoyment. And so like throwing a triple cream cheese or a pretty hearty stew at it, I think would be really cool because it's going to keep kind of playing off what's happening with the food. And then for the the St. Bernardus Tripel, a dry, fairly spicy, pretty like medium balanced alcohol with fruity yeast and spicy yeast character with medium bitterness to it. In terms of intensity of all these beers, I feel like the St. Bernardus Tripel might be like the easiest drinking. Because it's like everything's kind of like in the middle. It's like medium spiciness, medium yeast esters, medium bitterness. The body is kind of light. Nothing's really like lingering for a long time. It wraps up the palate pretty quickly. I think the Chimay Tripel for me right now might be the most like interesting on the nose and overall in terms of its flavor profile, but the intensity of the bitterness and that lingering, drying bitterness is pretty high, and I think overall drinkability might be a little less on that one. I think the Westmalle is kind of somewhere in between, and I don't know how I would rank these beers. I'm not here to rank these beers, honestly. I mean, in terms of the style, they're all classic examples. So if I was judging a competition and each one of these beers were listed, at some point it's just coming down to personal preference, right? But which of these is my personal preference? I don't know. It really depends, because I really do love the cardamom and like pink peppercorn that's happening on the Chimay Tripel, but that bitterness is like long lingering, and I can tell it's more sweet finish. So I think in the end, I don't know if I'll enjoy that sweet finish as much as I would having like the clean sort of overall more like neutralness of the triple, of the St. Bernardus Tripel. So that's a tough one. And then overall, I still really do enjoy the Westmalle Tripel. But at least at the moment, I'm getting maybe a little less like fruitiness and everything on it, more of that like overripe banana. And at the moment, compared to the Chimay Tripel, I wish there was like a little bit more yeast complexity happening here. But in terms of the overall refreshingness, it finishes a little drier than the St. Bernardus Tripel. So maybe I would enjoy that more, but kind of depends. Okay, what else would be useful? So another thing, as you're going through these sort of styles like this, or going through a tasting like this, take that time to look at your vital statistics. This is useful not because sometimes you need to remember like IBUs are in the 20 to 40 range, etc. But it's useful for just giving you a quick glance so that you can start just associating these numbers with an overall range. For instance, IBUs are 20 to 40. So now you can think about at least the perception on a dry Belgian style beer, what 20 to 40 IBUs feels like. SRM's 4.5 to 7. So you can kind of lock that in as like, even though I don't have the machine in front of me to tell me like, okay, what exact SRM is this? I can at least calibrate my eye a little bit to say, okay, this is like the 4.5 to 7-ish range. And the original gravity, 75 to 85, or 1.075 to 1.085. And the finishing gravity, 0.008 to 1014. So that's that dry territory. Not as dry as Saison, but definitely dry. And then ABV, 7.5 to 9.5. And yeah, so I think the next step for anybody who's looking more into doing kind of deep dives of studying would be to definitely grab these beers. Hopefully you were just tasting these beers along at the same time and making your own notes. But if you could do this with friends, you can bounce ideas off, that's a good idea too. And from here, if we were to follow this up with a side-by-side of 3, let's say, golden ales, or 3 Belgian blondes, that would be a good way to kind of see the differences between them all. And obviously you have to moderate how much you can consume in one day. But if you have done all of these 3 triples, and then you had done on a separate day a comparison of let's say 3 examples from Golden Strong, and then the next day or week 3 examples from Belgian Golden, Blonde, Belgian Blonde, then you could pick maybe like the one that represents that style the most for you of each one of those, and then do a side-by-side of those. Because if we look at the next important thing, which would be the style comparison, it says may resemble a Belgian Golden Strong Ale, but slightly darker and a bit fuller bodied, with more emphasis on phenols and less on esters, and fewer late hops. Should not seem like a blonde barley wine. So maybe then you should even try a blonde barley wine, or find a barley wine that's kind of more in the blonde territory, and compare it with this and think about, why is it not this? So to wrap up, I think I rambled a little bit with this one. It's probably the high alcohol content. But the thing that makes a triple to me is, for one, it has a slider character. For 2, or maybe the most important, would be that it showcases Belgian yeast character. And what that means is it showcases Belgian yeast esters, which would be fruity, like whether it's citrus or like palm fruit. And it showcases those yeast phenols like black pepper, clove, etc. And it has an alcohol range of, pretty assertive, like 7.5 to 9-ish%, right? So that's how I would describe this style to somebody. And it's very dry, right? Did I say very dry? But very dry, pale Belgian thing. Yeah, I think I'm buzzed from just tasting these 3 ounces of each. So that's that. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and suggest videos that you'd like me to do more of these style comparisons on. And hopefully they're useful for you. If there's something that's not as useful or something you want more of, just let me know and I'll adapt, because that's really the point, is for me to get to study and revisit these classic styles so that I'm sharp, but also to help other people who are looking to improve how they taste, so that they have someone to kind of taste along with as well. So that's it for now. See you next time. Have a great day.